All righty, it is Monday evening, and this is Green Oaks Gaming. We are here for the journey. We're going to be talking about exploring campaign building, world building, all of that great stuff, exploring the worlds that we're building, and we're going to start diving right in. So in the last couple of weeks, we have been prepping up for a campaign. And to go through the process, we picked out a land that we're going to be going to. And it is an area in my game world that I have not used since 3rd edition, so a number of years. So I have not touched or updated this area in my game world for some time. We may juggle back and forth between cameras here a little bit, just because behind me we've got a little bit going on, but we'll see where the show leads. Now, in the last video, we talked a lot about the political aspects of the people in this area, as well as the military in this area. And this area is a country. So to break it down, to think about it, we have to think of it as a country that is on a larger continent with 2 other countries. Now they are geographically separated quite a bit. While still connected, there is some separation there that allows them to be more independent. So this kingdom here is where we're going to be focusing on. We've already got some good bones. Greystone, which was previously the capital, so to say, but some good locations with some good story building. We know there is a citadel here on the map. We're going to use that as our first adventure. Because I've already written the story, I know the initial kind of point I want to bring the PCs in. Now, I didn't cover religion in the last time because I talked about having kind of 3-prong approach, right? There are political intrigue aspects that we can have characters delve into and see what's going on and unweave and untangle the mess there. That's one story arc that the characters could choose to explore. Maybe something they don't even want to touch. So regardless, it's there. We'll have some breadcrumbs out. And if they dive in and explore, then we'll get into that deeper and deeper. But if they choose to ignore everything political, with the changing, of course, in this one, the monarchs have died, and they are estranged younger nobles who could be taking up the mantle. So how that plays out in this game world could depend on what the characters do. So currently there is one who watches the northeastern coast and one for the southwestern coast. That's how the 2 nobles, the Duke and the Duchess, are kind of divided up so far. And they are the Duke and the Duchess of the coasts. So they'll be pulled into it, and then it'll be implied that there are some opportunities to explore that. Now the military aspect is this citadel had been under military kind of control, I guess. It's a base for the group, a primary group, right? Not a primary group of military members. Now that is what's bringing our characters in completely, 100%. They're here to explore what's going on, what's happened, why these people at this military location are now not responding to an ally. So that's the primary crux. We need to have some understanding on the military so that we can dive in and make that place feel and sound and look and smell realistic. We need to have some good insight into it so we can make it good. Now, we could have dove into the religious aspects as well, but I wanted to break that off and have it in a separate video, just because this campaign, which is called Upon the Throne of Blood, has some big religious aspects to it. So the characters are going to start out at 10th level. They'll end at 15, or in 15, I should say. Now, the primary driving force of this campaign is a devil. Demons will be playing a part of it. When you get into these upper echelon levels, you need to have big threats that are menacing and hard to overcome. So you can't just do orcs and gnolls and goblins and kobolds. I mean, you can, I suppose, but for me, I find it more work to do something like that. So I up the stakes. Now these are threats that could have an impact on the world at large. So a devil is kind of pulling the strings, I would say, or being the catalyst of bringing the heroes here. The whole reason that the heroes are needed is because of this devil. Now, with that being said, but what's the best opposition to devils? Well, you guessed it, religious. Now, I do quite a bit of religion in my games, and I have a lot of people with concerns say that they don't, because they're an atheist, or they don't like to jumble religion and gaming, whatever the case may be. So I don't have any problems with that. It's very easy for me to put in political intrigue pieces and not have it relate to or be driven by or have it be a reflection of realistic aspects. I'm looking at this as its own world. So it's got its own problems, it's got its own political intrigue. I'm able to separate religion, politics, the whole 9 yards pretty easily. So if this doesn't come to you, you may not be able to pull as much out of it, but I really urge you to just give it a shake and see what you think. So for me, the devil, who is kind of pulling the strings, one of their, I don't want to give away too much. That's why I'm trying to keep things close to the vest and not just spilling the beans. But one of the devil's good adversaries, I would say, is Bahamut, the dragon god. And of course depicted through different ways in different editions through different years. And this devil actually has been depicted in a couple of different ways. And had a few different devils, I suppose, running the domain for this devil. So that's kind of what I'm going off of. So religion for us is going to play a important aspect in this game. We know that. So the religious people have to have a real good sense that they are established. And I've already got a couple of different bits. It is going to be because of the religious aspect that the characters kind of get pulled in from their current campaign. And to do that, I'm actually going to, just like we did with the others, kind of describe what the religious figures kind of look like. And to do that, we have to know some history about them. Starting with who are they? Who are their gods? Who do they worship? And how is it impacting our story? So the religion for us, I'm going to go old school, and this kind of aspect of Bahamut is actually Marduk. And this is a god that was used extremely limited in Dungeons and Dragons, and based off of an actual god of our world, but changed quite a bit for the game. And one of the good things about the game is we can continue to change up that character. So one of the aspects of the clerics is they have painted additional eyes and ears on their heads. So as I'm thinking about this kind of thing, and we talked, I still want to tie things together. So I'm going to use these types of characters as diplomats to kind of lay the seeds now for this story. So they're going to meet my players' current characters, and I wanted to think about that exchange. When we were talking about the political figures and the military figures, we kept talking about the caps as well as the general populace. So I was thinking about these kind of crocheted or hand knit hats, and the priests will have tall, kind of more formed ones. They're going to look kind of like a top hat without the rim, and then they'll have some structure in there, possibly some of the saltwood. Maybe it's metal rods. I haven't decided exactly what yet. But when they pull their cap off, they'll actually have their heads shaved with extra eyes and ears painted on their head. So it ties into their god. That's a way that they show that they're worshipers. They're still wearing clothes of their region with these knit and almost crochet looking hats, but they're reflecting who their gods are, and in such a very public way that it's very appropriate that they are very religious. Religion is going to be very important to these people. They're not ashamed of it. And because a lot of people don't know this aspect of this religion, it's going to seem very antiquated and different to my players, hopefully, and their characters. So this is a god who has not really been talked about or really seen very much. They'll have to have very high religion checks to recognize the iconography. They may not even know who this god is until they get there. But it's going to play a very important aspect in our game. Now, the reason it's going to play a very important aspect in our game is when the characters start diving into the area, we go right back to what we started laying out ahead of time. All of the people at the end of the third age were being really controlled by these, at the time, PCs who came and subjugated the lands. They took over and conquered the lands. And at the close of the age, we know that there was big change. And then they went through the fourth age and then another big change. And now we're in the fifth age. They're starting to adapt and become their own. So I put together this story because our campaign just kind of ended as the characters overtook the the land mass. We kind of stretched it out and said that they would be able to take over the continent, and we ended it there. We never did anything. So in my mind, I'm now going back and filling in some of the details of when those PCs took over that land and they subjugated. One of the things they did was they brought their religions into it. So I did some looking to see if I could see what the kind of religious aspects were. I didn't have all my notes. So I do know that there were 2 domains. One of them was life, that was not really used for life. And then the other one was tempest, and they were using Norse mythology for their gods. They were worshiping Thor. So I was thinking tempests, I was thinking life, but twisted, using it just for themselves and not in a good kind of community aspect. So I picked out just a couple of gods, and those gods were brought into it. And based on the characters that we're playing, one of them was a human that worshipped Thor, and one of them was a half-elf, and I did not have the notes for who they worshipped, so I thought, let's make it actually be Lathander. And while Lathander is, arguably fire and light, there is also aspects of life in there. So those gods were brought and pushed upon the people. They had to worship Lathander and Thor. And I went primarily with Lathander. These people are subjugated and pushed this Lathander down their throat. So when they finally rose up and the PCs were the previous PCs, because they did not play a great, and I'm sorry, not great, they did not play a good campaign, I allow for consequences. So the people eventually overthrew them. They finally rose up and busted out of this subjugation and overthrew the PCs. Now, there are many theories. They could have been thrown out to sea. They could have been booted into a different plane. Maybe they went back home. Who knows? That's not the important aspect. But they overthrew the PCs. And now, as people are bringing in these religions, they went back to what worked before. Before this subjugation, they had an ancient religion that was revered, thought a lot about Tempest, just simply because of the volcano aspects, as well as the rough seas. But I kept coming back to, I want more ancient, more ancient, more ancient. And that's how I came across deciding to use Marduk. Marduk. I'm going to have to look and just make sure that I'm pronouncing that correctly. But for that aspect, they kind of pulled it out from the shadows, dusted it off, cleaned it up, and said, you know what, we went astray. We let these strangers in, and they pushed Lathander down our throat. We were kind of lost in the Fourth Age. We're going to get it right this time, and we are going to go back to our roots. We're going to do what worked before we got subjugated, even though, you know, ultimately you could argue, did it work if they got subjugated? But they're going back to their roots. And so the worship of this ancient god being brought back ties right back into our antiquated military, our antiquated customs, our kind of antiquated clothing styles, goes back into it and feeds and builds on our story. So our story is getting more and more support that this area, this land, these lands are kind of almost moving backwards, right? They're using very antiquated things, tools, locations, gods, dress, attire, diplomacy, the whole 9 yards. So it works really well to tie back in. So we've got an ancient god. And for this ancient god, where are the holiest places going to be? Ancient temples. So ancient temples are big. But because these people were subjugated, they don't know exactly where all the ancient temples are. Boom, we've already got an opportunity for some discovery. Some of these ancient temples will be locations in the game that the characters will have to explore. How will they be able to explore? Will they need to find them? Or they need to be kind of handed the scroll saying, we found this ancient temple, we go check it out, kind of deal. So I already know I've got 2 kind of temple encounters that I want to run, that I want to use. So ancient temples, boom, right into it. These are temples of Marduk that have been lost to time and are either just now being found based on the, you know, secret that they find in this outpost, or that they're handed by the leaders of Marduk when they make the military leaders mad, when the players make the military leaders mad, because that is a possibility. We just have to know. We've got to have some way to get the players looking at this next thing. So ancient temples goes right into it. Now, one of the other aspects that we talked about was with the players, if they decided to go through and ultimately dig into the political intrigue, finding out the iconographs or the heraldry of the single-headed griffin, the crowned griffin on the tower, becoming more open with 2 heads, then that gives them an aspect and an opportunity to start exploring the best way to bring them into that discourse of the kind of dueling of the Duke and the Duchess and the scheming of the counselors and the magistrates and all of that political upheaval that could be coming because the monarch is now dead. So we have that front as an option. Now they ultimately will be pulling the strings behind the military and the temple aspects of this game. So depending on which kind of direction the characters want to explore, all of them are going to be intertwined. It's just which ones are we going to suss out the most and how are we going to adapt and change as we're telling the story together. Now the military aspect, we know that's going to be the first location. But they could make the military mad because they're not honoring tradition and really making sure that the standards and the traditional hierarchy are being respected, which could make the military mad. Even if we close that door, we still have windows of the religious aspect as well as the political aspect to begin to exploit. If they completely shut down the military, immediately the religious aspect should come to them and say, we have these couple of ancient temples that have just been unearthed that we would like you to explore, make sure they're safe, make sure they're usable, because we want to bring them back into the fold, make sure that we're able to complete the worship of Marduk in these locations and honor that aspect of our religion. Now again, the PCs could also make the religious aspects kind of fall into shambles. It is a possibility, but we've provided another avenue. Now, if they're shutting down multiple avenues, at that point we need to reevaluate the games that we're running. So I like to have different aspects and just see which ones they latch onto the most and build from that aspect. So this one here, again, for religious aspects of this game, what's going to be important? Well, the dress, it's got to tie back in. So important aspects are hat, the materials. Like the royalty, I can see them using rougher, fabrics and furs. I can see them doing a little more import-export trading kind of goods because they're looking for reaching further than just their shores, right? They're reaching to the heavens. They're reaching to other planes. So this one here, they will begin to have more materials lightly integrated. And there again, that's because they are looking at being beyond this realm. So jewels still. We talked about the political and nobility having jewels encrusted into their rough-hewn clothing. They will also have jewels tied in. They'll also have things like scepters, rods, all types of religious dressing that we can do. Perhaps they also have a censer, that billows out the incense as they're moving along. So a lot of religious iconographs. Now for them, their hat, we are going to have that be like a top hat with the crowned aspect. So there again, we're putting that crown into it to kind of tie them into nobility. Like many kind of religion state things, you have to think a lot of this is about power. This campaign specifically. So military is all about power. The religion should be all about power, and the nobility is all about power. Who can gather the power to control what happens upon the throne of blood? That's what this whole campaign is all about. So we've got a good idea on the kind of aspects of our religion. Now, who's allowed into it? So this is ancient religion, and this is for the good of the land. Now, because it was before the time of subjugation, I would assume that most people would be happy to partake and practice and, you know, maybe preach a little bit. So this is going to be widespread, but locals being locals who they are, as our characters are interacting with them, we don't want this to be like a primary focus. Most people, especially, you know, if they're locals, whether they're farming, whether they're mining, whether they're, you know, felling trees, fishing, any aspect, there are going to be things that are very dictative in their lives. So we will say that while this is widespread, we're going to say it's not the only aspect. Because this land is not completely closed off from the world, and there should be some little bits of knowledge and sharing of different religions. So we're going to say tempest domains, particularly, are going to be important to locals. They'll pray for good rains as they're needing crops to grow. They'll pray for breaks from the crashing waves when they're trying to fish, and the ripping winds that's howling across the sea and over the coastlines. They'll pray that the volcano does not explode. So tempest domains will still be known and used, just not super widespread and not like the official religion of the land. So we'll be able to bring some of those aspects in, and more so if we have any characters who are, you know, using a tempest domain, some recognition from the locals into it. Now it could lead to one of those where, oh, that's not good, that's not the official, that's not exactly what we do kind of deal. We have two aspects where we can either welcome them in or push them out a little bit and say, nope, 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 nope. You keep your gods to yourself. You don't spread any of that here. We don't tolerate it. Because when we were subjugated, we had that forced down our throat, and we're not going to do it again. So we've got two aspects that we can use religion to play on. We know we're going to have two ancient temples. We know those ancient temples are going to feature Marduk very strongly. So there should be, you know, as you dig into it, some of the important aspects are carvings. There are ceremonial vestments, which by now should be, you know, pretty rotten and old unless they're magical. That could be some of the rewards that we're going to be doing. But these should be aspects of the religion that they will find in the ancient temples. And then ultimately, what's the goal of the religion? Well, it's simply to worship Marduk and bring about the more open and accepted worship of Marduk without having others say no, try to push anything down their throats. This is a religion that is very proud, very traditional, but they're still doing a lot of searching because they don't have all the information. It got laid to waste when Lathander was brought to the land. So, questioning. Maybe if anybody rolls a really high religion check as they're doing any type of investigation or anything like that, we can have them recall some type of study or ancient sculpture that they studied or that they saw, something that they'll be able to connect with this and possibly even offer some insight into the religious leadership. So with this one here, we don't have an NPC yet selected from this kind of hierarchy, but I want one. I really want one. We've got the Duke, we've got the Duchess, we've got the Gentleman in Gray. So we've got those three aspects. Noble, kind of courtier. We've got a noble with some military with the Duke. We've got some local with some military with the Gentleman in Gray. Now I want to add some religion. And to do religion, I'm actually going to have a younger scribe who is going to go through and document what the heroes are doing. This is a great way for them to have to take this NPC along, for the NPC to interact with the characters in possibly comedic, possibly serious ways, but also remind them that they're being held accountable, right? Now you could say they could just fire him, tell him not to come along and everything, but this is a scribe who is very traditional, very concerned about uncovering the past worship, finding the temples, and really making a good impact for the people. So he's not going to be easily dissuaded. Now what happens if he got killed? Well, then his ghost is going to stand around and haunt. I want this younger scribe NPC. Now I've got 4 NPCs that I can use with my characters to bring insight, offer quest ideas, offer solutions, and continue to move story forward when I need to. If they're taking too long trying to decide should they go east or west to look for one of these 2 ancient temples, the scribe can ultimately come up and say, here are the findings we've had so far, and here's what we're able to piece together, and that may help spur decisions on. So NPC number 4, we've now got 4 people basically that will help the party when needed. They will not be the stars of the show. This is the character story. These NPCs here are designed just to help move story along, provide information, and allow a good way for the characters to connect to different aspects of this campaign. So 4 NPCs. We've got our religion really well figured out. We've got our military well figured out. We've got the nobility well figured out. And not fine-tuned by any means. We've got a lot more details that we can add into this. And I probably will, just not on camera, because I figure those are good starting points. And the more you do when you dive into these things, the more familiarity you're going to get with it. And the more you're going to live and breathe it and be able to, really talk well about it at your gaming table. So the next aspect, and I know we've only got about half an hour left. So the next aspect I want to talk about is I want to start talking about location. Location, location, location. Location is key. So I always have a starting point, and then I want to have a base of operations. So my starting point is never my base of operations, ever. So the players meet in a tavern, they're on a ship, they're chained in a prison. Whatever your starting location is, wherever you start your characters out, has got to be something separate from their base of operations. And we're going to look at both. So for this campaign, my characters are literally going to be meeting in a tavern. It's going to be an inn. they will receive an invitation to go to this location and partake in an adventure. I believe we've talked about this a little bit in a couple of streams before. So when they get there, there are going to be some other NPCs there who will question it, and some of them will get up and leave. That's going to be a good reminder for my characters that, hey, we're here to be good. We're here to solve problems for this area, and there is a lot of direction we can go. So it's those three things. Now after that, when they decide they're going to stay or they're going to leave and then change up a character, at that point they are going to be moved to a location that they'll be able to use as a base of operations. So for my characters, that is going to be a location in Greystone. So they will have an area that is specifically set for them to operate out of. Now this is because they're 10th level. They're not going to need to do much building, anything like that, while they're welcome to. This is a pretty short campaign. Levels 10 to 15 tend to go pretty fast. So we're not going to be here much, in game terms. So they're not going to be able to build up a big keep and really start managing things like that. So I'm going to start them with a location in Greystone. Now they may decide once they clear out the Citadel, let's say, that they want to move in there because it's maybe closer to the next location they want to go to. But ultimately, we want to make them feel that their base of operations is the safest place. There should be a constant draw for them to go back to their base of operations to rest, relax, recover, recharge, rearm, and then move out into the field. Let me know if that makes sense. If not, just I'll leave a comment. So for the base of operations, it's going to have a couple of things. Because we're 10th level specifically, very focused on that 10th to 15th level progression, your players are automatically, whether they're new or experienced players, they're automatically going to have several wants. The first one is privacy. No characters want to think that the guards are listening to them. No characters are going to want to think that people can come and go in their space because they want to be able to talk, they want to be able to plot, they want to be able to rest without having, Liamin's tiny hut up or whatever the case may be. So privacy, and I'll put /security. Now the next thing they're going to want is access, right? They want to be able to come and go as they choose. So access is super easy. If they have to stop and go through 5 different gates with 10 different keys and retinal scans, they're going to be less likely to continue to come back to the space frequently and make them feel, that may really make them feel safe. But if you have to go through this process each and every time, it could slow things down. So they'll want easy access, in and out. They'll be able to come and go as they please and how they please and when they please. The third thing that they're really going to want is going to be a place to, I'll say, supply. So whether that's magic arms and armor, whether it's potions and scrolls, maybe it's just cannon fodder that they want people to go in and, be meat shields. Whatever the case, whatever they're looking for, they're going to want to be able to supply up, and pretty regularly. Especially if you're, using super high magic levels, which I'm not. But so to address each of those, the base of operations, the biggest thing is that privacy and security. So for me, they are not going to be in the palace, right? They are going to have, this is going to be a some type of a royal dignitary building. And not the whole building, because the way Greystone is built, it's kind of on a waterfall. It's got a waterfall moving on either side of it and kind of into the front of it a little bit, but it's a tall, massive city within a waterfall, coming out of the waterfall, rather. They'll have an area that is going to be part of a larger building where it's going to have a terrace, it's going to have, you know, a couple of balconies, it's going to have plenty of room. So think of maybe like a 2-story condo or something like that. That's what they'll have. Now below them is going to be a number of empty spaces, empty floors, maybe supplies, something like that, but dead space, so that they should feel very secure that nobody's listening to them. They've got their privacy, and should anything be trying to get to them, they've got plenty of opportunities to get out. So that's a dignitary building. That's going to be more for diplomacy. Not been used now for some time because these people have been kind of shying away, sticking more close to just working on themselves after being subjugated 2 ages ago. So it'll be older, but still opulent enough to make them comfortable. Now, access. When we talked about military a little bit, we talked about the military, because this is built on extremely kind of mountainous terrain, right? It used to be a volcano. We talked that the military is going to do most of their travel via flight. They're going to use flying types of birds. So I love peregrine falcons. I think they are so amazing. So that's actually, we're going to use the giant eagle stat blocks, and that's what they're going to be offered as means of transportation, along with the Royal and upper echelon guards, is giant falcons. So access with falcons, of course you need a rookery. So that will be part of this thing over by the terrace on their location. And then for supply, of course, Greyport is a very large city, so there will be a location for them to get regular supplies, mundane supplies, as well as a very proud and somewhat wealthy aspect for collectors of magic wares. So for me, you can't go down to the local enchantress and buy a +4 Vorpal weapon or a +5 Vorpal sword. You're not going to be able to go and buy +3 plate armor. It just doesn't happen. I stick closer to rules as written in that aspect, but there are collectors of magic items, as well as a couple of people who may be novices attempting to do some enchantment, practice wizardry, and they just may not be too good. So with that, we've got a good solid base of operations, and we've looked at 3 kind of pillars that could entice the characters to become more and more entangled in the story based on the type of characters, what motivates them, and ultimately which direction the players want to choose to take them in. We've looked at how to tie that religious aspect back in to the nobility, into the military, into the land that we're playing in. And then we've started talking about the base of operations. Where are we going to allow these players to hang their hat? That's an important aspect because those 4 NPCs are also going to be hanging their hat there. May not always seem like it. They may kind of come and go. Sometimes the players are there and the NPCs are not, but they'll have just enough access to be usable, be able to bring information regularly and share information regularly, and really be an aspect of helping the characters with the story. We know where they kind of rank, what their backgrounds are, so we can describe them in better detail. That's what we're going to work on next time, is we are actually going to go through and start putting up a little bit of kind of just rough sketch and doodle and artwork for our NPCs, as well as some of the key locations. So some of it I have a little bit from the previous game, like I do have the map of the sanctuary, the first location that we'll be exploring. So I want to go through and talk a little bit about how I'm going to change it and how I'm going to make it fit into this narrative with this culture that we're putting together, how we're going to make sure that it feels like it fits and that these people are the ones who are here, and how to ultimately use it to build the set upon which our characters are going to do their explorations. So just like that, see, we finished up a little bit ahead of time. I've been going too fast. So just like that, we have gone through and finished out the kind of pillars, I like to say, of civilization. We've got a base of operations. We have a good idea on how we're going to start integrating things. Now we just have to take all of the notes that we've got so far, start putting it together. We'll get it in a nice format that is easy to kind of use as a guide at the table. Now mine are going to be very heavy paper, pen, and pencil. Yours may be digital. Just keep following along and take what you can, use what you can, and pop it in the format of your choice. And before too long, you're going to be so well versed with your own game world that you'll be able to bring people in from games that they've played for 20 years, and they'll think you have spent 20 years building your game world as well. So remember, the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. The more you put into it, the more your players are going to get out of it as well. So don't hesitate. Take the time, do the prep work. I highly recommend it. I don't think you can go wrong at all. The more prep work that you do, the more versed you are in your game world, the more you're going to be able to bring it to life at the table, make your characters really integrate into it and feel it and interact with it, which is going to keep your players invested, intrigued, and ultimately playing in your game world even more. So you can't beat that. You just can't beat it. I hope you enjoyed the journey so far. Next time we are going to be working on a lot more, like I said, sketching and just putting notes together, getting it into a good format to make sure that we've got consistency, good flow, and supporting materials. And as we get closer and closer to launching this campaign, we're just getting closer and closer to being able to bring this area of our game world back to life after so many years. I'm so excited. I hope you are too. Have a fantastic adventure.